The Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada presents Healthy Mondays with Apina of Nevada. Start the week healthy and right with interesting conversations on living a healthy lifestyle. And now, your Healthy Mondays host, Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong.
Aloha! Good evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Once again, welcome to Healthy Monday with Alpina of Nevada. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig at pagtangkilik sa aming programa. I'm yours truly, Dr. Mary Faye Axon Armstrong, founding president of the Asian American Pacific Islander Nurse Association of Nevada and professor at Roseman University College of Nursing. September is a Sickle Cell Awareness Month, designated by Congress to help focus attention on the need for research and treatment of sickle cell disease, in short, SCD. Millions of people do not know they have sickle cell trait because the trait usually does not cause illness. So tonight, I have a special guest, a friend, a nursing colleague from Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration's Minority Fellowship Program, and an expert in SCD. So Dr. Cheedy Jaja, let me read. Welcome, Dr. Cheedy.
Thank you.
So Dr. Cheedy Jaja is an associate professor in the College of Nursing at the University of South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina.
Yes.
He has over a decades of experience providing clinical and psychosocial care to patients with sickle cell disease or SCD. Across the curriculum, he is in the ambulatory healthcare settings and over 28 years of teaching experience across the curriculum in nursing, social sciences, arts, and humanities in institutions of higher education across the USA. He is also a board-certified psychiatric and mental health practitioner, and he holds active registered nurse license in the state of South Carolina, Washington, and Maryland. So I will let him speak about his endeavors and passion related to SCD, especially his mission work in West Africa. Welcome again, Dr. Cheedy.
Thank you, Mary-Faye. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this show. I had fun the last time,
Yes. We, as for our listeners out there, we focus on children because Dr. Cheedy is very passionate about children who has been diagnosed with SCD. But tonight, in honor of the September as a national Sickle Cell Disease Awareness Month, we are going to focus on adults, women, men, and I guess older adults can have sickle cell disease as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My oldest patient is actually in early 70s.
Yes, and I was sharing with Dr. Cheedy earlier that I do have personally know someone who has SCD. So maybe you can start off. I know you have some questions that we were going to focus on, but because our show is only 30 minutes, so it's kind of well, we'll see. Maybe start with what sparked your interest in pursuing career in healthcare in the healthcare field.
Well, it kind of like creep up on me because, I think I have in me this innate, desire, to help people. I think growing up with 7 sisters, I'm the eldest, in my family. So it's me and then 7 girls and then the boy at the tail end, so growing up, having to be the big brother, having to take care of your siblings. And I think that, spark, this desire to be caring, to be nurturing, and as you've read from my bio, I actually walked through several, career before I actually end up being a nurse. I worked as an air traffic controller, and then for a number of years, I was a philosophy professor. But I guess that's natural instinct to be nurturing, that maternal, instinct to be caring, finally, got around and led me to become a nurse, and I think this is really what I was cut out to do.
So for our listeners who may not know what sickle cell disease is, what is it?
Sickle cell disease is the most common genetic disorder worldwide. So just to give you a perspective, approximately 25 million folks worldwide are, are afflicted with sickle cell disease. Okay, but the term itself, is a generic term, for actually a complex group, of genetic disorder. Okay, but what they have in common is that they result from a mutation in the hemoglobin molecule, which is a protein in the red blood cell. And that mutation gives rise to a whole range of complications, for which the most common of those complications is anemia and vaso-occlusive crisis, the kind of pain that the sickle cell patient experience that often lead them to the emergency room.
So how is the disease diagnosed?
It's very simple. It's all that's required is a blood test, and here in America, it's part of a newborn screening regimen. So depending on the state, where kids, are born, each state, have a newborn screening program, and they will test for a variety of genetic disorder, of which sickle cell disease is one. Okay, so basically, it's just a simple blood sample that is taken from the babies at birth, within 3 to 5 days of birth, and then that's sent to a lab, and the sickle cell test is done, and then the result is sent back, to a physician or a pediatrician that is assigned to that family. But that's in the United States, and much so in Europe. But in other parts of the world, mostly in Africa, newborn screening is not available at birth. Okay, so the easiest or the most common way that you could tell that a child has sickle cell disease is around about the age of 5 to 6 months, when they start experiencing pain, and it will manifest itself as swelling in the arms, and the limbs, So that's how you know that a kid, has sickle cell disease in those parts of the world where newborn screening is not available.
Yeah. And I know earlier we spoke of, and I shared about that personally know someone who has sickle cell disease. And
Yes.
Naja Green, I actually invited her, I think sometime last year or the year before, to be my guest. And she had talked about her lived experience as having SCD. She's actually a nurse as well, and also a nurse case manager who I work with at Queens Medical Center. Back in the days. So you mentioned about pain. I had witnessed how it was excruciating pain. She was just crying, tears, because as you know, it affects the whole body system, the bones, the heart, the lungs, because it's the blood, and the blood
Yes.
goes through the rest of her body, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, and I know that she had recently just had a bone marrow transplant. And
Awesome.
yeah, and so the positive thing about what happened with her is she actually got pregnant and had a baby girl, and now the baby girl is now 6 years old. So that
Awesome.
was a happy
That's
ending
awesome.
for
Yes.
herself. So I know that the only known cure for SCD is a type of bone marrow transplant called hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. So how quick can an individual get the type of transplant, and what is the wait time?
Well, okay. To say this in very, very simple terms, okay. Stem cell transplant is not. It's a cure, okay, but it's not, the type of cure that is available, to everybody. Okay. So again, to put things in perspective, in the United States, we believe that approximately 100,000 individuals, and that's a very conservative estimate, we believe that 100,000 individuals, have sickle cell disease, okay? But the disease burden, by that I mean the bulk of the sickle cell population, you'll find mainly in two parts well, actually in 3 parts of the world. You find them in sub-Saharan Africa, with Nigeria being, the country with the greatest number. You also find them in India, the subcontinent of India, in Asia, and then you also find them in Brazil, in South America. Okay, and typically, folks who are afflicted with sickle cell disease tend to be folks of color, and often you're from limited socioeconomic status. Stem cell transplant is a massive technological, financial endeavor. Okay, and so it's not the kind of therapy that you think is accessible, to everyone. Okay, but the good news though is that recently the NIH and the Bill Gates Foundation announced a massive multi-million-dollar initiative whereby they're looking for stem cell type options that does not require the massive financial investment and the wait time, the strict regimen that patient has to go through. So Bill Gates and NIH are now looking for low-cost stem cell transplant type options. But that's in the future.
Okay, so I know that when I went on the website, there is actually a President's Proclamation because the Congress proclaimed September as the National Sickle Cell Disease. So I guess I could just read here the proclamation of the President here, and he's saying that SCD, which is sickle cell disease, is a chronic, debilitating, inherited condition that afflicts 100,000 Americans, primarily, as you mentioned, Dr. Cheedy, African Americans and Hispanic Americans. And 1 in 13 African Americans and approximately 1 in 100 Hispanic Americans carry the gene for this disease. So those individuals with 2 copies of the gene have a blood cells that are, you mentioned, sickle cell shape instead of cylindrical, which causes a disruption in blood flow that can damage many organs, including the brain and kidneys. And a person with SCD can begin experiencing the negative effects, as you mentioned earlier, early childhood, including pain, organ damage, and risk of stroke. Unfortunately, it is estimated that only 1 in 4 patients in SCD in America receive the care that they need, as you have mentioned. So the question is, and to our people out there, so then they can be aware of SCD, what are ways people can help individuals who suffer from sickle cell disease?
Okay, so let me classify the different type of individuals that are likely to interact with patients with sickle cell disease. So let's start with the healthcare providers, and those are your doctors and nurses who work mostly in the acute care setting. Okay, so we mentioned earlier that the most common symptoms of sickle cell disease is pain crisis. And sometimes this pain, it varies from individual to individual, but sometimes this pain, gets so severe that the over-counter medication, your ibuprofen, that folks usually take for pain, are not sufficient, to take care of the pain. So these individuals in pain crisis, typically will have to go, to the emergency department. And the thing about sickle cell disease is that somebody could be in a pain crisis, but there is no outward sign that they're in a pain crisis. Usually when somebody is in an accident, you will see signs, they have broken bones and blood all over, and you could tell that person is in pain. But with patients with sickle cell disease, when they're in pain crisis, they look normal. So when they show up in the hospital, looking normal, even though they're in acute pain, they often dismissed, as a drug seekers, or that you only hear because you want to get, opioids, and that creates a stigma, whereby patients with sickle cell disease, are wrongly, viewed, as, drug seekers, drug hoarders, and that kind of thing. And then the other thing, though, is that because this patient experience pain so often, they acquire tolerance, to opioids, to the pain medication that they prescribe. So when you develop tolerance, it means that you're going to need large amounts of pain medication, to take care of your pain. So the mere fact that this patient requires, very huge, very high amount of pain medication, just kind of like reinforce, that idea among healthcare providers, that these folks, are drug seekers. So we need to inform, educate healthcare providers that know that sickle cell pain, is even worse than cancer pain. I mean, in my personal experience, I've taken care of patients with Ebola, but I could tell you that Ebola has nothing to sickle cell disease. Folks who experience pain will tell you that if they have the option to die when they're in a pain crisis, they will opt for that option. Go ahead. The other thing, the other group, are family and friends and the larger society. Having sickle cell does not mean that you cannot live a normal and fruitful and productive life. Okay, sickle cell, is a genetic chronic condition, and just like HIV, that is now viewed as a chronic condition, having sickle cell disease does not preclude you from having a very productive, life. So we should not see sickle cell disease as a disability, but just as one of those life, chronic conditions. And provide, folks, with the support, let's get rid of the stigma, and, encourage these folks, give them support, and make them feel as like they are normal human beings.
Yeah, it's so true, Dr. Cheedy, that you mentioned about the pain. As I teach my nursing students, I always emphasize that pain is very subjective. When your patient or whoever you're taking care of, they say they're in pain, then they're in pain because you don't feel their pain. It's very subjective. And I know when I was working at bedside, I was working at Triple Army Medical Center, and I had taken care of a lot of patients who are in what we call sickle cell crisis. And that's when they really need to be hospitalized. And I know you mentioned about the tablets, medication for pain, that doesn't even touch their pain. They have to be in the PCA, the patient-controlled analgesic, because it's subjective. So then they can just give the pain medication for themselves. They press a button and they give the pain medication. Of course, there's limitation too, so then they don't get overdose. But it's so true that we need to be aware about this disease and the negative impact that it has on the individual who has the disease. So I guess one of the things that I want to ask, and I'm looking at the question that we have over here. So what advice can you leave with our listeners today about sickle cell disease in general?
Okay, good question. Well, first and foremost, we need to show empathy, care, concern, and some love, to folks who have sickle cell disease, because what they're going through, we cannot even imagine. I have friends, I have colleagues, I have family members who, who have sickle cell disease. And I could tell you, it really pains me, when they describe the type of experience that they go through on a normal basis. Chronic pain, we don't talk a lot about chronic pain in sickle cell disease, but research has shown that chronic pain is part of the daily existence, among sickle cell patients, that even though they might not show sign of it, there's always an underlying chronic pain as part of their existence. So love, support, and the empathy is very important, okay? Another advice is that folks should know their genotype. So there's a lot of people who have the sickle cell trait and don't even know it. And having the sickle cell trait has implication for reproductive decision making, because you know how we inherit sickle cell disease when two individuals have the trait and end up having a kid, and that kid has 1 in 4 chance of having sickle cell disease. So it's very important that we know, sickle cell hemoglobin status. So that's another option. But more importantly, I think educating ourselves about sickle cell disease, moving away from the stigma, showing love, empathy, and concern, is what I would advise your listeners to manifest and display toward this patient population.
Well, I do have another personal experience, and I mentioned about Naja, who was a friend of mine and a colleague back in Hawaii. And I remember we work as case managers, we work side by side with social workers, right? Mm-hmm. So we got really close. We needed a 2 nurse case manager in one of the tele unit and another social worker who was, so we're like a team. So immediately after we found out that she does have sickle cell disease, because she was out for a while, and then when she came back, she had confided in us what's going on with her. And our colleague social worker started crying, not just crying in tears, but she was sobbing because I guess throughout the time that we were working together, Naja shared that she wanted to have a baby. And you know that, yeah, and you know that that's a very difficult decision because, as you know, it's hereditary, right?
Yes,
The sickle cell disease. So she has to make a decision like, do I really want to have babies, knowing that I might give my traits to them? And definitely, I don't know how the traits is transferred, but she started sobbing like, oh, she told me that she wanted to have a baby, and now that now I know that she has SCD, then how is she going to make that decision? So that was about 10 plus years ago. And then in the course of time, I think it's just a couple of years ago that I got a hold of Nadia on Facebook and found out and saw a picture of a baby,
awesome.
A baby girl. So I think there is a happy ending for people who have been diagnosed with SCD. As you mentioned, they're not really disabled. This friend of mine is a registered nurse. She has her master's degree. She's a case manager, and I think she's working for a company right now. She has a family. So there's still a happy ending for those who have SCD.
Definitely. The landscape has changed dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, in 2019 alone, the FDA approved 2 brand new drugs for sickle cell disease. And in 2017, in 2017, another drug was approved. Prior to that, for almost 19 years, only one drug, idoxuria, was approved by FDA for sickle cell disease. So we now have on the market, 4 drugs, that are targeted towards addressing sickle cell pain and related morbidity. So the landscape is improving. I mentioned again the Bill Gates multi-million-dollar initiative, but in addition to that, there are several drug trials on the way. Last time I looked at the literature, close to about 50 new molecules are currently being investigated as possible treatment, for sickle cell disease. So there's hope, like I said, it's a chronic condition. And one of the things that we in the healthcare profession have learned to do over the years is how to take care of chronic condition, and how to support, a patient, deal, with those type of affliction. So the landscape is very, very promising for sickle cell patients.
Yeah, so maybe we still have a little bit time to for you to share your mission work in the West Africa. I'm excited
Ah,
about that one.
okay. So COVID is really, put a damper on all, our plans. I was actually supposed to be in Sierra Leone over the summer, to do a variety of work with both kids and adults with sickle cell disease. So one of the plans that we had, was because we have in Sierra Leone, we have a registry that we put together over the last 3 years of 2,500 adults with sickle cell disease. And these individuals don't have, like a dedicated program, or clinic, that they could go to for managing even the pain, let alone the other complication of sickle cell disease. So I was able to get a small contract from the NIH to study ulcers. Ulcer is a common morbidity in patients with sickle cell disease. So the NIH is studying ulcers in adults with sickle cell disease here in the United States. So I was able to convince the researchers involved in that program to say, why don't we study the same thing in Sierra Leone? So we had this funding, and we're going to study, how ulcer is developed, how it is cared for in Sierra Leone, and the rate at which it got healed or get cured. And we're going to compare that information with patients in America and patients in Sierra Leone. But more importantly, I was going to use that program, as a gateway to start a clinic for adults with sickle cell disease. But with COVID, we have to put that on hold. Our plan, though, is that sometime next year, we're hoping that by March of 2021, things would have kind of normalized, and we'll be able, to go back to Sierra Leone and start working with the adult patient. Okay. Our clinic for kids is still up and running. As I mentioned the last time, we have about 120 children that we're providing care for. That program is up and running. We still need to put in place a newborn screening program in one of the main maternity hospitals. But again, that's on hold until COVID is behind us.
Thank you for sharing your mission and your passion, for the West Africa population. So I'm reading on the website about that this theme for this year is Sickle Cell Matters. And our listeners out there, you can share the Awareness Month flyer on the website. And also, we encourage everyone to be part of this national effort to increase awareness about sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait during the month of September. Individuals and organizations can join the efforts to bring attention to sickle cell disease by engaging our elected officials. It's going to be election time, right?
Yes.
Pretty soon. And you can ask your elected officials for proclamations, hosting awareness events, distributing educational information to dispel the myths about sickle cell disease, and lighting up public spaces, buildings, and landmarks red. I don't know about that one, but I guess that's one of the initiatives that they have. So, wow, time flies when we're having fun, Dr. Cheedy.
It sure does. It sure does.
It's always good to see your smiling face, and I know your laugh is so contagious. There you go.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Thank you very much, and I hope that next year, I don't think this year we're going to see each other face to face, so I hope we missed the Hawaii trip,
You sure did, yeah.
Thank you again, Dr. Cheedy Jaja.
It's always a pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And also PHLB Radio for your continued partnership with us, Apina of Nevada, and to bring all this information to our listeners out there. So remember, listeners out there, every Monday is a healthy Monday. Aloha.
The Asian American Pacific Islander Nurses Association of Nevada has just brought you Healthy Mondays with Apina of Nevada.